up in China. Right now, they're reopening. There's expected to be possibly 1 million deaths as a result of the rapid reopening, and they are hoarding medications there. There's a lot of medications that can't be found here. There's antibiotic shortages and all the rest. So, and you also, of course, want to have a fuel source. You want to have a way to keep your home warm. So make sure that if you have some space in a yard, hopefully you're fortunate enough, if you're watching this, to have a home where you can stockpile some wood, get yourself a wood stove, and find a way to integrate that into your home. Because it's going to be a long, long winter. We got some wild weather coming in, and you know, eastern Canada it's like 50-50. We're at the same latitude. One half of the country is record high temperatures, the other half is record cold temperatures. It is just wild. Now, we got a lot of stuff to talk about, okay? Things are not looking good, guys. I need to reiterate this point because Russian media is not talking about this, and the MSM isn't really giving this enough emphasis. The Russians are going to be spending 1/3 of their total budget on the military. Do you realize how big of an amount that is? Okay, even if the Russian budget were only $100 billion, which it's going to be, I think, 1.5 trillion. I believe that was their GDP numbers last year. So we're talking about a third. And typically, any nation is only going to be spending in the very, very low single-digit percentages on their military. Russians are going to be spending a third. That's massive. That's a huge war mobilization. They are preparing for a very, very long war. And they're not saying anything about this because that comes at the cost of all of their other usual expenditures that are not going to be given the attention that they need, whether it's healthcare, education, building roads, all of these things. Okay, Russia is going full-on war mode, and they aren't the only ones. The Japanese are going to be the third, I believe, biggest spenders, biggest military expenditures in the world, going from being a totally pacifist country, now committing, I think it's $320 billion, okay, to rearming themselves to prepare in the Eastern Theater, which will likely involve Russia and China. I'm sorry, the Russians and the Chinese versus the Japanese. This is why there's these versions of Russian strategic bombers in and around Japanese airspace as a show of force, and of course the Japanese are preparing to go to war with China as well. So at the same time, you have the Poles, who are preparing to be the largest ground-based military in Europe. So they're buying up a lot of weapons and equipment. So every place around the world is trying to rapidly arm itself to the teeth. So I am not a fiduciary. I'm not going to give you any sort of financial advice. But what I will say, if I had money right now, myself personally, the only place that I think we're going to be seeing some real security in such a way that it's going to be able to beat the inflation rate is probably in the military-industrial complex. And it's surprising to me that none of these so-called finance channels out here on YouTube are talking about this at all. I mean, every single country is scrambling to arm itself to the teeth, and there's only so much raw materials to make bullets, to make artillery shells. Okay, a lot of the raw materials come from China and Russia. So, in many ways, the West is beholden to them if they want to arm themselves, and they have to find alternative methods of doing that. So if I was an investor right now, I might be considering that because, guys, that signals that there's a big, big war coming, that this war ain't going anywhere, and it's going to take everything down with it. Food prices, the price of oil is going to skyrocket again because China has now opened up. The release from the Strategic Oil Reserve has started to diminish. All of these factors are going to start driving fuel prices up once again. Right now there's a bit of a glut because of all of the liquid natural gas that was stored in Europe in anticipation of the long winter. That is already starting to recede. We already are starting to see the slowing of the release from the Strategic Oil Reserve. And eventually, you know, that they're not going to be able to do that anymore. Or if they do continue to do it, it's going to start to create a bit of a panic. I think it's going to reach a point where, you know, you can release so much oil from the strategic oil reserve, but once you start depleting it to a certain extent, people are going to actually start to be concerned that, okay, maybe there really is, you know, oil scarcity on the horizon, and it actually can have the opposite effect of raising oil prices. Because, yes, you're flooding the market with cheaper oil or an attempt to kind of bring down prices, but I think you reach a point where maybe people are going to say, does this mean that there really is oil shortages on the horizon, material oil shortages, which is likely going to be the case now that China has fully opened up once again. Now, anyways, let's get to the Russia-Ukraine nuclear war situation. We have the Americans just 20 miles now from the Russian border. Okay, there is so many points of escalation in this conflict right now. I'm going to try to go over all of them here today, but we're going to talk about that. That's probably the biggest story of the last 24 hours. And Dmitry Medvedev, who typically has very bellicose belligerence in his statements, he is a lot more sober in the statements that he's made, and it appears as though
it's a risk, and I don't know what's on the other side.
The Russian government, who has now rejected any sort of talks, they have rationalized now that they are effectively at war with NATO. The statements that he has made in the last 24 signal that we are entering a different phase of this war that not a lot of people are ready for. That's why the first thing I said when I started this video was just stock up on food, ammunition, medicine if you can. Russian arms manufacturers are switching to a 6-day work week. 12-hour days, 6 days a week. Okay, this is according to Audrey, I cannot pronounce his last name, not even going to try. It's the craziest looking last name I have ever seen on a piece of paper. Anyways, he's the head of the Federation of Local Trade Unions. And yeah, so they're going to be working a lot to try to meet the demands of the war. Recall the United States is running out of weapons as well. I think a third of their Stingers and Javelins have been used. They've already contributed about 1 million artillery rounds, and they can only produce 14,000 a day, but they're burning through like 50,000 a day. So, 14,000 a month is what they can produce, and they're going to try to triple that in order to keep up with the demand. But if the war intensifies, they're not going to be able to do that. Okay, we have Moscow preparing shelters. This is concerning. They've been doing this all year, but now they're saying that authorities are equipping shelters in apartment buildings and shopping centers in the Moscow region. The head of the Emergency Ministry's Regional Administration, Sergei Polotikin, told the plenary session of the Moscow Region Duma. So, shelters in apartment buildings to provide protection from the population from missiles, bombs, and artillery strikes. So they're trying to frame this, because I don't think they want to spook the population. They're trying to frame this as preparation for conventional strikes, probably in lieu of the recent attack on Engels Air Base by that Ukrainian drone that might have spooked some people. Of course, that came within a spitting distance of Moscow itself. And they're also going to be publishing interactive maps of shelters and place signs throughout the city where the nearest shelters are at. Moscow is preparing for nuclear Armageddon, while Russia loads nuclear silos. Okay, this is crazy, man. Like, this is getting very too close for comfort, all right? You have a Russian state media today, and they always have some funny things to say, but this was this definitely delivered in that respect. A Sarmat nuclear missile, they say, armed with a 100 megaton nuclear warhead, if they targeted the Russian the Yellowstone super volcano, could create a Western civilization ending event. Recall that the supervolcano in Yellowstone hasn't been set off for 800,000 years. Of course, if it was set off, it'd probably release a huge cloud of ash which would circle the northern hemisphere and create some nuclear winter-style equivalent. So this would likely backfire on the Russians as well. I'm not sure why they're saying this. I think they're just commenting on the asymmetrical nature of the use of some of these very large 100 megaton class nuclear weapons. Like they were talking about the Belgorod Poseidon nuclear powered nuke. Yes, nuclear powered, like nuclear propulsion nuke, which can travel 10,000 miles underwater, and how they could generate tsunamis as opposed to just using one nuke to maybe take out 100-mile radius around New York City. You could use that one nuke to take out the entire eastern seaboard. So, you know, it's pretty interesting how they're talking about utilizing nuclear weapons in these asymmetrical sort of ways. This all comes, of course, because the Russians now claim to have evidence of direct involvement of the United States and Poland in the massive military logistical support of the Kiev regime in the preparation and implementation of the attack on Engels Air Base. So they're saying, Moscow that is, that the drone avionics and control stations were manufactured. The drone that was used to target Russia's nuclear triad now was manufactured by American SpectraWorks, a company that performed the initial coordination and control of the drones at Scottsdale Airport in Arizona. In addition,
what could this gun and this holster have to do with these two phones? It's actually pretty simple, and I'm going to demonstrate right now. This is an old iPhone 6. What you have right here is an iPhone 14. Which one is better? That's pretty obvious. They're going to both make phone calls, they're both going to text, but this does everything better, which is why this is the better phone. And so, what I want to show you is that even though this holster can carry a gun, it's not the best holster for you. In fact, I would argue that people who have holsters like this are actually making a really big mistake. That mistake is this holster is uncomfortable, which forces a lot of people simply not to carry. And let's be honest, if you're into concealed carrying, the whole idea is that you're going to have your gun with you at all times, which is why you want a comfortable holster, something that you can carry all day, never even notice it's there. And that is why I want to show you.
The final assembly and flight tests took place on Polish territory. So, they are setting the groundwork for providing justification for declaring NATO, for effectively declaring war against NATO. Now, I'm going to talk a bit about some comments that were made by Dmitry Medvedev today, he's the deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, former president, and typically he is very aggressive in his language. He has very colorful ways to describe his feelings towards the West. Usually he's talking about the four horsemen of the apocalypse and directly threatening nuclear strikes. This time, of course, his language was much calmer, and that is a cause for concern, because a change from the baseline like that is a concern. When a really loud guy gets quiet all of a sudden, you know something is coming. Medvedev has noted that the leaders of NATO countries keep unanimously squawking that their countries and the entire bloc are not at war with Russia. Yet everyone is well aware that this is not the case. Considering this, questions have emerged as to whether some objects of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization could be valid military targets. He reiterated that the issue of legitimate military targets has been interpreted differently throughout human history as it's perceived in the context of war. Thus, according to Medvedev, within the framework of the stated rules of warfare, legitimate military targets are, for instance, any military or any enemy troops who have not been officially withdrawn from its armed forces. But he goes on, he lists a few, but the main one is this one right here, is that the military and political leadership of an adversary state, the armed forces of other countries that officially entered the war being allied to the enemy state, the facilities located on their soil. Effectively, he's talking about, the short of it is NATO and its leaders and, of course, the places where they're perhaps training soldiers, the staging points for where they're sending in a lot of these weapon systems, and Western leaders themselves are legitimate targets according to Moscow now. So they're providing the rationale for an attack against NATO. Just another data point to consider. Another data point was that this guy right here, Valery Gerasimov, okay, apparently they tried to assassinate him. This is the chief of the general staff of the Russian armed forces. Okay, I believe he's like second in command after Sergei Shoigu. So this guy's big time. And apparently Ukrainian authorities attempted to assassinate him. This is according to the New York Times now. This is a Western media source. Apparently Washington was against the idea and they tried to call off the attack, but the Ukrainians did it anyways.
We are being deceived. The border crisis is not like what we've been told. Behind the 5 million illegal immigrants who entered our country in the last 2 years are criminal cartels, the United Nations, and the U.S. government. Our investigations uncovered that while Americans are being told that the government is working to resolve the crisis, in reality, coordinated efforts with the United Nations and funding from the U.S. government using taxpayer money are facilitating the trafficking of migrants. We toured both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border to uncover how the U.S. and Ukraine are quietly running the border crisis. This is documented in the Investigative Special Feature Program, The Border Deception. Our report has also investigated many months into how drugs are pouring across the U.S. border, brought freely to America by
against the best wishes of Washington. Fortunately for all of us, they weren't successful because that would have probably been close to being on the level of the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Okay, when we start seeing the assassination of these high-ranking officials, that's when I'd be concerned. And I almost think that we're really overdue for something like that at this point. Some really high-ranking official from Russia or Ukraine is probably going to be taken out, and that is going to be the trigger for a major escalation in the conflict beyond the conventional level. Another interesting story and data point for you to consider. This is from Rio Novosti. Take it with a grain of salt. That's a Russian state-sponsored media source. According to them, Poland is preparing to hold a referendum in May. This is according to columnist Hannah Kramer. She claims that Warsaw is preparing to effectively annex Western Ukraine. We've been talking about this for months, but this is part of the reason why they are drafting hundreds of thousands of troops, why they're buying hundreds of tanks from the United States and weapons from South Korea and aspiring to be the biggest military in Europe. That's why. Because they have plans to have a referendum in Western Ukraine, and it's going to be very similar to what happened on the Russian front with the 4 annexed territories. Due to the heavy losses of the armed forces of Ukraine, Ukrainian units will completely lose their combat potential in May. Now, you know, the United States military analysts think otherwise. They think that the Ukrainians could probably get all the way down to Crimea by then. So again, take this with a grain of salt. But there's definitely some truth in this. Where there's smoke, there is most certainly fire. And what they're saying here is that after capturing parts of Ukraine, Warsaw will announce a referendum on July 11th. Kramer predicts, because this date is symbolic, since on this day in 1943, the massacre of the Polish population of the village of Volhynia, organized by Ukrainian nationalists, reached its climax. So we may start to see a two-front war. Very similar to what happened in World War II, where you had both sides descending upon Berlin, only now both sides are going to be descending upon Ukraine. And I'm not making any comparisons there. I know some people are going to make some comparisons, and you know, there's definitely some very flagrant nationalism. Some of it is probably a little bit extreme going on there right now, or has been going on the last 6 years. Anyways, do with that what you will, but it appears as though the war is going to get very interesting. Now, I still think that Poland's primary adversary and who they're preparing for is the Russians. They're probably going to be the next front for NATO once Ukraine eventually falls, if it does fall. And that's why they're arming Poland to the teeth right now, because they know that the war is going to blow in that direction very soon. As I talked about, the U.S. has now been deemed complicit in the attacks on Russian airfields. That is hugely significant, okay? I mean, this is what we said on day one. We came out and said that obviously this Ukrainian drone attack on the nuclear triad of Russia had U.S. fingerprints all over it. But, fortunately, this realization came later on and not, instantaneously, because we may well be in a totally different world. Because I think sometimes, when the investigation can be done afterwards and the tension can be drawn down a little bit, and that gives us some time to hopefully prevent escalating to the non-conventional nuclear level.
My girlfriend says I smell
really bad. Blakefish left in the sun all day. But I've been seeing this Dr. Squatch soap all over YouTube.
Some analysts are thinking that effectively was the escalation to the Third World War, that, the U.S. has now been complicit in these attacks on Russian territory. I mean, recall, we were talking before about, I think earlier in the year, Russian red lines. One of the red lines was just the attacking Crimea, period. Okay, sending any missiles to Crimea. Now we're talking about attacking Russia itself, and not just Russia itself, but the nuclear triad within Russia. I mean, that's a huge step. So red lines have been crossed. Ultimately, we are going to see a nuclear detonation. I believe, at minimum, we will see a nuclear test. And that is going to put the markets in a tailspin. It's going to cause global panic, even if it's in just the farthest nether regions of Siberia where they conduct this nuclear test. It is going to spook everybody, and it's going to lead to panic buying. And maybe that in and of itself will cause China to maybe get involved a little bit. But I don't think Russia is at the behest of China like a lot of people think. I think they're going to do what's right for what they believe is right for their own national security. And China, at the end of the day, needs Russian energy. So while they also need their alliance, it's a very mutually beneficial relationship. So it's not like China can say, hey, you do this and you do that. Russia still is nuclear superiority over China, like 10 times fold. So, anyways, I think I'm getting sick, guys. I'm starting to get a little bit of brain fog. Maybe I'm starting to get COVID or something. Let's see if I can get through the rest of this video. I want to show you guys something, though. Check this out. This is from the Canadian knife maker. Look at this. This is a gift that I received. This is a Rambo Bowie knife. That thing is a beast. He's going to be in-house next week, showing us a little bit about knife sharpening and using the Tormac sharpening system. That'll be very cool, but this thing is just a freaking beast. I want to go fight a bear. I'll probably die, but hey, it'll be a valiant death. Look at the size of that sheath. That thing is a beauty. Handmade leather sheath. This thing is going right next to my eagle feathers. That is something that you don't see every... You know what I want.
Here we go from the Daily Mail. Biden's non-binary nuclear waste worker Sam Brinton leaves the Department of Energy after being accused of stealing suitcases from 2 airports. Let me stop you there, Daily Mail. He wasn't accused. He was criminally charged, and he's on camera doing it. You even posted the videos. Oh, no, they didn't post the videos here. Maybe if we refresh it, we'll get something. Well, no, that's just him wearing a dress. There we go. They posted the actual photo of him stealing some woman's luggage. So I guess what they're saying now, and then here's him Look at this. Here's him wearing the shirt in an airport, stealing the bag, and then here's him posting a selfie confirming it was in fact him wearing that shirt.
Sam, that's not yours. Put it back.
Yeah.
So what they're saying now is, they're saying he's not non-binary. He gets off on stealing women's clothes and then wearing them in public and making people watch him do it. So it's like a klepto fetish thing.
That's so weird. When this
Yeah.
guy joined
Really?
the department,
Well, he's on camera doing it more than once, stealing women's clothing. And-
Okay, I want you to be right, because that's
I'm not saying I know for sure. I'm saying this is what people are saying now about what's happening.
that's a better story than non-binary.
The speculation is that
Non-binary is boring now. There's plenty of
Oh, no,
non-binary
yeah.
people out there.
the speculation is that he steals women's clothing and gets off on having people watch him wear it. So it's not about gender identity; it's about him stealing from them, and then
So it's like autogynephilia, where it's just walking around kind of.
autogyneplectic. Wait,
Yeah, that's a klepto-autogynephilia.
Yeah,
where he's
yeah.
walking around kind of walking around with someone else's stuff, like kind of
Autoklepto-
semi-hard.
Autokleptophilia.
I don't know what. I don't know.
No, that would be like stealing from yourself.
Yeah,
Somehow.
it'd be klepto autogynephilia. You're stealing.
Voyeuristic, right? is that where you want people to watch you?
Yeah, it'd be a klepto voyeuristic
Is that voyeur?
autogynephilia.
No, exhibitionist. No, wait. Is exhibitionist?
I,
Because we said voyeur before, and someone claimed like, no, you have it backwards.
is there a word for that? There's not a.
a voyeur would be someone that wants to watch. A voyeur would be someone that wants to be watched.
So it's exhibitionist. He wants to be watched.
Yeah.
So it's
Damn it.
exhibitionist, klepto, autogynephilia.
He likes attention.
Yeah.
And it is he, right? We're not gendering.
I think that's safe. I mean,
I don't know.
it's a
I don't know either.
a sexual male.
I just
but
don't want someone-
identifies as.
I just don't want someone to be able to be like, oh, you were misgendering him, and like make the focus the fact that there was a
If
misgendering.
you focus on sex, the biology of this guy when he was born was male, and I think he is at some point transitioned his gender to cis.
Oh, yeah.
Not cis. I don't.
Voyeurism is when you get off watching other people.
Yeah.
So exhibitionist is, I think, right?
When he joined the Biden administration, I was kind of like, this is endgame for me.
Yeah,
I
so-
guess we get people like this with lipstick, bald guy looking weird, acting, dancing around and dragging.
Awesome. He doesn't know what's in those
In the White
suitcases.
House.
He just knows
It'd
it's
be-
women's clothing.
Then I find out he's a thief.
You know, it'd be a lot funnier if it turns out that like his early life story was that he was like a skydiver and a snowboarder, and he gets off on adrenaline rushes.
Crazier the better, man.
So he just like steals women's clothing.
The more
at the
outlandish,
airport.
the more I love it.
And then
The
he's like,
more-
he's wearing the evidence of his felonies, and he's getting an adrenaline rush from people watching him do it.
Hey, he's a more honest politician than the other politicians in Washington, D.C., okay?
Oh, he's a bureaucrat, not a politician. He's,
Yeah,
he's
he's-
worse.
Yeah. Even still, I mean, I have to give this story 2 thumbs up because I'm enjoying it so much. So I appreciate your service, Sam.
It feels like like I've been praying, and this is kind of what happens when you pray, is that people be.
I'm praying that someone that works for the government steals women's bags
it's
and
just
wears
that
the clothes.
people-
That's an interesting prayer you got there.
People reveal who they really are. When you're deep in prayer with God, people start to reveal who they really are, and people like this thief, is now it's apparent that he's a thief.
Yeah.
So that's good.
This is like stealing someone's like he stole bags that were worth thousands of dollars. It's like it's demonic, but in not like the worst way. Like demonic that freaks me out is when
Demonic in the most bourgeois way.
yeah, like you know, demonic. Usually, I'm imagining Epstein stuff, like high level demonic, satanic, evil. This is like mischief.
Yeah.
You know,
Except
it's criminal.
stealing the person's luggage. That's freak. There might have been insulin in there. I don't know.
Yeah.
There might have been something. And that guy didn't even check in with the bag, but walked out with one.
Well, not. I don't think insulin because it has to be refrigerated.
Probably not
Some
insulin, but
medications.
something life-saving, something you need. You know,
Yeah.
hopefully you'll check that stuff, but there might be stuff you need that you can't check or that you can't. Hopefully you'll take it on and carry on.
You know, people sometimes are addicted to like painkillers.
So
what
stealing-
happens if someone had their painkillers inside of them?
Stealing back from a store, I understand. It's not like you're eating someone's face in, but stealing someone's personal belonging is very different than stealing something from a store, in my opinion.
Evil people, man.
Yeah.
I'm glad he was
That's crazy.
exposed.
Like I said, I'm happy that it happened because I get to imbibe the story and enjoy it, but that's the extent of it.
So he's on leave now?
Fired. No longer an employee.
That's just
And criminally charged.
Yeah.
employees. What?
Going to prison. Gonna get locked up.
Well, it depends on
Grand
the
larceny.
No, here's the
district
look.
attorney that he gets.
The crazy thing is, apparently the first time Brinton got caught doing this, he told the cop, like, oh, I accidentally grabbed the wrong bag and didn't realize it, and then I panicked because people thought I stole it, so I just left it, and then I brought it back to the airport or whatever, and it's like, bro, you're on camera with no bag.
And that was the day he gave to check a bag.
You had no bag.
Yeah.
You go to the airport with no bag, and you take someone's bag, you know you stole it. Yep. At the very least, you know, like, you could get a generic black travel bag, but the dude just not even smart enough to do that.
He got caught twice. Now imagine how many times he wasn't caught. Because how many times will officers or security actually go through the whole footage, actually look at the whole scenario, and actually do a full investigation to find out who stole a luggage bag? I mean, I had a bag once missing, and they were like, yeah, screw you, tough luck.
Yep.
So how many times did he get away with it is the larger question.
I want it to be double digits, and I want to hear about every one of them.
I'd be willing to bet the clothing he's wearing all the time is clothing he stole from women.
Oh man, it's saying I need $11.86 to get free shipping, but I already have everything I want in my cart. I know, I'll just do free store pickup. Boom. Hi, I'm Gina from Kohl's. And as much as I love free shipping, I love free store pickup even more. At Kohl's, you can order online and pick up in your local store for free, no matter how much or little you spend. There's 2 easy ways to do it. If you need something in a hurry, choose Buy Online Free Store Pickup today for items that are already in stock at your store. Most orders are available for pickup within 2 hours, so long as you're ordering within 2 hours of the store closing. Simply order what you want on Kohl's.com and choose Free Store Pickup today. You'll be notified when your order's ready for pickup. Then drive to the store and snag one of our awesome reserved parking spots. Head inside to...
God, I hope that's true.
Why? I don't know.
Because I think it's a hilarious, crazy story. I just like the fact that it's such a crazy, chaotic story. Like, so outlandish. This person gets hired and then just flies around the country stealing people's bags and wears clothing of the opposite sex and
then does a lot of weird dog stuff too.
I mean,
oh yeah,
a lot of dog stuff. Yeah, a lot of dog masks.
I love him. I love him.
Bald dude with lipstick. He looks like Matt Damon too.
I love
Keep
him.
saying that.
Absolutely, like Matt Damon.
Sorry, Matt. Or congratulations, Matt.
Congratulations.
Nice job, guys.
Yeah, he looks like a bald Matt Damon.
Maybe Matt can play him in the movie.
Oh, there we go.
It'll be the older Britain. Is that his name? The older Britain.
It's a biopic about the dude who stole luggage from the airport.
How did I get here?
Phil's dying.
Get it.
He can't do it.
Get it.
Can we hire Matt Damon to do this?
Maybe at some point. Did he do an FTX commercial?
Sam
He did not. He did, didn't he?
I don't know, but
No, he did a crypto commercial. Was it? FTX.
Matt Damon crypto commercial.
That was crypto.com.
So are all those people are getting sued, like Larry David for this FTX thing. Larry David are they actually getting sued? You guys know if they're
I don't
Tom
know. I
Brady?
think so, but it's kind of dumb. Like, doing a commercial is not the same as like running and committing the fraud. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Like, there's no way these guys knew. It's a crypto exchange.
Yeah, and the exchange outwardly said they were going to do it righteously, and they lied. If the exchange had been saying they're going to do it illegally, and then Tom Brady was still doing commercials for him, he'd be implicated, in my opinion.
Tom Brady was an investor. He's probably super angry about that. I mean, just like not only the people that have money in FTX, but it's also the people that were investors.
That's why him and Giselle are getting divorced.
Yeah.
She's mad. She's like, I can't believe you, Tom.
No, she was the one who pushed him to do it.
She's the one that
That's
did
a
it.
bad idea, and then she's like, just do it, money.
I'm the one that makes the money in this family here with your stupid football. She makes so much more money than he does.
He was able to take a low contract because of that.
Yeah.
The Patriots have a huge amount of money to spend on players. Nice job.
I got Media Matters is mad at me because I was talking about what story were we talking about? I think it was Elon or something. Yeah, it was the Elon story. I said woke people want companies to keep on bad employees based on their identity.
Yeah, they do.
And the left got mad at me for saying that, but I'm like, but that's a fact statement.
That's true. Media Matters is always mad at someone.
Yeah.
My favorite person at Media Matters is the girl that watches Tucker Carlson. Her whole job is just to watch Tucker Carlson and be a bitch. And I'm like, you're the best. I love her. She's great.
Who is it?
Her name's Kat.
Cat.
Yeah, and she works for Media Matters. Her job is to watch Tucker Carlson and just be a complete.
We should do that. We should just hire someone.
Well, there are people that do that. I mean, there's people that watch like Media Matter stuff, and like Sean, Actual Justice Warrior. He's great. All his job is just to crap all over the Young Turks.
We gotta do like a Mystery Science Theater thing with MSNBC, where we just get like people to watch it and comment on it in real time.
So much fun.
Probably get 3 comedians just to watch, Rachel Maddow specials.
Joy Reid.
I wouldn't wish
Joy Reid.
I wouldn't wish that horror on anyone. Are you kidding me? That's torture.
Hilarious.
Yeah, seriously. Joy Reid says the most ridiculous shit. It would be friggin' awesome to have 3 silhouettes just sitting there trashing every ridiculous thing that comes out of her mouth.
Yeah.
She's great.
She got hacked once.
Oh wait.
You remember that story?
Oh, she actually tweeted something and then said it was a hack.
She posted a blog that was like opposing gay marriage or something.
Yeah.
And then she's like, they hacked me.
They hacked me. And then you want to be like, who's they, Joy?
Yeah, but who's they though?
What do you mean, Joy?
That's the crazy thing about modern cancel culture stuff is that these people know that the whims of the left rotate randomly, and so they have to say something today that they have to disagree with tomorrow. So then they just deny it and make up a reason. I didn't really say that. I was hacked.
Like, is it a system that's trying to constantly subvert the system, and if the system changes, it needs to create a different type of subversion? So you're
It's
always
the continuous revolution. As soon as something becomes old, as soon as something becomes the norm or a part of the status quo, then it becomes counter-revolutionary, and so they have the revolutionaries have to oppose anything that's considered status quo. So it's all about constantly performing the dialectic, or constantly pushing the envelope, constantly being revolutionary. That's why when you listen to old videos of like Castro talking or whatever, he's always talking about counter-revolutionaries, and the revolution continues. Like, the revolution happened, Castro got into power in Cuba, and then you listen to Castro talk for the next 60 or whatever years, however long he was alive. It's
A new stimulus for Americans born after 1957 was just announced. Eligible Americans will receive cash compensation. $0 dental.
About the latest in Ukraine. So we have a couple of major pieces that we want to cover tonight, because we have a major prisoner swap that we're going to talk about. And we got an update just a short time before our show came on the air from the White House on that piece of the story. They're getting slammed at this hour over it. We have a new round of sanctions from Europe, because that's great, because your energy bills aren't high enough already. I put out a poll earlier, like, have you noticed any change in your energy bills thanks to Russian sanctions? I think our poll is like at 90% of you have now said that you've seen a major change in your energy bills. So this is affecting all of us. And we're also going to look at the threat of nuclear war, what Vladimir Putin said on that, and the U.S. doesn't want to know where the money is going in Ukraine. So a lot of that. So let's get to the first piece of this, which is the nuclear threat. So a major update now, and I think a lot of people are saying, well, are we slow marching towards nuclear Armageddon? Like, that's the question. Vladimir Putin has laid out his conditions on nuclear war, what his plans are if he's continued to be provoked. He says, I will not launch nuclear weapons. I'm not going to be the first to do that, nor would I want to be the second to do that. But we will, under all circumstances, defend our territory if we are continued to be hit by long-range weapons from the West. And we continue to hit long-range weapons from the West. So, like, what the hell are we doing? Like, we are literally asking for this. So he was asked by a reporter under what circumstances this would happen. And so over the past 24 hours, he's been very candid about this war. We've got a lot of troop updates from him. We've got a lot of movements of like when the next stage of this mobilization is going to happen. And we got this, watch.
Regarding threats of nuclear war, Svetlana Gennadievna, you are right, this threat is growing. There is nothing to hide here. Regarding the fact that under no circumstances will Russia strike first, if it does not strike first under any circumstances, then it will not strike second either, because the possibilities of a nuclear strike on our territory are very limited. However, our strategy is to consider nuclear weapons, and they are weapons of mass destruction, as a means of protection. It is all set up around the so-called retaliation. Did we talk about the possibility of using nuclear weapons? No. The former Prime Minister of Great Britain, let us not mention her by name. also directly publicly said that she was ready to do it. In response to this, I had to emphasize some things too. Right away, her statements were ignored, and what we said was immediately stuck out, and the statements were used to frighten the whole world. We haven't gone crazy. We are aware of what nuclear weapons are. We have these means, and they are in a more advanced and more modern form than any other nuclear country. This is an obvious fact today, but we are not going to brandish this weapon like a razor running around the world. But of course, we proceed from the fact that it is.
So, saber rattling here, you know? I mean, I think this is what we're doing. Like, we really, you know, it's amazing because some video emerged today from 2015, and it showed, you know, British soldiers training Ukrainian soldiers in Britain. And one of the questions from the Russian government is why in 2015 would there have been a need for the UK to be actively training Ukrainian soldiers, 22,000 of them in 2015? It's like long before this war started. So they've been actively provoking and pushing, and we now know, without a doubt, of course, it's a NATO war, and it's a NATO provocation. And we're continuing to send weapons. Russia announced today that it destroyed 5 HIMARS that we've sent there. I think we've sent a total of 17 of them, so they've destroyed 5 of them now.
Well, if you look at the Minsk
Millions
Accords,
of taxpayer dollars down the toilet.
looking at the Minsk Accords, Putin has been wanting this to be a peaceful thing all along. Like, it's like, but we kept antagonizing them. Then they went against and dropped those accords. Like, they didn't adhere to them.
Or exist,
like,
yeah.
I don't even know, like, at this point, like, what is he supposed to do? Like, if this was the United States, we already would have annihilated them.
Yeah. Oh, you mean in Ukraine? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's the next stage of this. It's like, okay, so now we've had these long-range attacks on electrical infrastructure, which Ukraine has said now that Russia has hit over 1,000 times in the past few weeks. 1,000 times. So Putin, I love this clip because, so last night was a holiday in Russia. Putin is drinking some champagne, and it's like he wandered over to the cameras, and he doesn't usually, like, just off the cuff, like, give, you know, conversations like, Mr. President, will you come over here and speak?
Yeah.
So he's just got, like, a glass of champagne, and he's like, yeah, you got some cameras there? I'm drinking. I'll answer some questions. I'll be frank with you. And this is kind of a frank moment from Putin. Watch this. So if you're watching this driving, he's like, who struck the Crimean Bridge? Who blew up the power lines at the Kursk nuclear plant? Who does not supply water to Donetsk? He said. Not supplying water to a city of 1 million people is an act of genocide. So he said at the beginning, we didn't start this, they did. No one has ever said a word about all of that. Complete silence, he says. As soon as we make a move, we do something in response to help those people, basically. Outrage at us, shouting at our entire universe. This will not interfere with our combat goals.
Holy cow, that's cool! But I'm not. Hey, it's survival expert Adam with Patriot Wholesale Club. It's crazy how this waterproof, windproof, and winter insulated emergency sleeping bag can keep you warm even inside of a freeze.
So 1,000 times, and now he also, frankly, in a separate interview, was talking about troop movements. He said, you know, they're like, well, are you going to now need another mobilization of troops? 300,000. He's like, no, let me explain something. And he went into great detail about where all 300,000 are positioned, how only a fraction of them are even on the front ready now. The others are in training. A lot of them in training facilities at the Ministry of Defense.
In fact, the U.S. State Department just confirmed this early over the weekend when we saw Antony Blinken on the Sunday shows. He said, I don't think they're going to need to mobilize again because they have barely moved the ones they've got.
Yeah, so
the United States knows this.
Yeah, and of course Antony Blinken also this weekend said they're not winterized. Like these guys, that was my favorite quote of like the month. Anthony Blinken's like, yeah, these Russian soldiers. He's like, they're the worst of the worst. They're not prepared. They're
not well trained.
And they're not winterized. He said they're not ready for winter. To which I said, look, Russia invented winter.
Yes.
This is why people don't win when they go into Russia. They lose because they sort of own winter. And then we saw a video over the past 24 hours of Russian troops in active combat training in Belarus, in snow, digging trenches and moving tanks through snow piles. So, and they often got their white snow uniforms on. It's like, it reminds me of like the G.I. Joe. Remember the G.I. Joe figures where they were like in the snow uniform? Like, oh, you got the white snow version of G.I. Joe.
Or the Star Wars when they're in the snow gear.
Yeah. So they're ready.
Well,
they are winterized.
Like Siberia, that's in Russia, isn't it like a winter escape? Like it's like you can't survive there.
It's like a hellhole. Yeah.
If you're, Siberia is like the comment for like permanent cold.
Yes.
Like, oh, you're afraid. I'm going to send you to Siberia.
Yeah. I had when I was at CBS, I had a hairdresser that was from Siberia to New York, and she was like, "This is not cold in the depth of winter. You'd be freezing." And she's like, "No, this is not cold. In Siberia, you walk from your car to your. She would be in winter from like your car to the building, and your hair freezes like an icicle."
Liquor Giant in our Rumble chat says GI Vanilla Gorilla. Yeah. But I remember those, like the G.I. Joes, like they were in the white uniform because they were like snow prepared. You're like, oh, you got the snow version of G.I. Joe. That's what these troops were wearing, training right now in Belarus. They are winterized and ready. My point is that we haven't even seen the start of the mobilization yet. And he explained where these troops are positioned. So we'll see over the coming weeks, post-Christmas, what happens here. Meanwhile, this from Dave DeCamp, one of our favorite websites is antiwar.com. He tweeted this a short time ago. He said, I had to do a double take on this one. Cluster bombs are indiscriminate. All this would do is make sure more civilians are killed. The CNN article, exclusive. Biden administration is weighing Ukrainian requests for access to U.S. stockpile of controversial cluster munitions. That's great. Yeah, just give them whatever we got. Want to kill more civilians? There you go. Meanwhile,
I guess those little butterfly-shaped things aren't enough anymore.
Pedal bombs?
The ones they were scattering, the ones they were scattering.
Can you clarify what you mean by cluster munitions?
They're not precise. It's just meant to be like throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping things stick. It's not precise.
It's a bomb that goes off in the air and then drops like hundreds of thousands of smaller bombs over the like an area. So it's definitely not precise.
Right. It's I'm just going to see if I can find some images of what they look like here. Yeah, they're filled with these like.
Oh, for goodness sake!
These are of course older, but like this is they're filled with. So of course when they go off, here's an example. You can see what a cluster bomb looks like, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just like, well, we're just going to hit wherever.
Yeah.
So we'll take out as many civilians as possible because we know how they've been great with civilians so far. All you need to do is look at Donbass and see how they've been with civilians. So,
well, and when you say they, be clear that that's Ukraine, not Russia. Like,
yes, I
don't want people to think that Russia is doing that because they are not.
Yes. So, and we know that, and that's what Putin was saying, of course, about what's unfolded in Donetsk, right? Getting rid of course, attacks there, but also the water supply and everything else. So, and we've had a number of reporters who've been in the Donbass recently, and of course, the attacks continue. They have continued all weekend in the Donbass. Meanwhile, the sanctions piece of this, so we should talk about that. The head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said that the 9th package of sanctions is now ready to go. 200. So here's a breakdown of these new sanctions, as if they were working so far. 200 Russian citizens and companies will be blacklisted. That's on the new sanctions. 3 Russian banks will be sanctioned. Russia's access to drones will be restricted. New export restrictions on all dual-use goods, electronics, technology used primarily for military purposes will be blacklisted or sanctioned, as well as sanctions against the mining sector. Oh, there we go. They know their mining sector because they need those. They absolutely need to build up their own precious minerals in Europe, and they need a ban on broadcasting of 4 Russian TV channels. Here's Ursula. Listen.
Hey, if you have an IRA or 401k account, you need to listen to this short message. Inflation is running hot. Markets are in turmoil, and a war is raging. If you think it was bad during the 2008 financial crisis when most 401k...
Russia continues to bring death and devastation to Ukraine. It is deliberately targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure. It is seeking to paralyze the country at the beginning of the winter. But we stand by Ukraine, and we will make Russia pay for its cruelty. The 8 packages of sanctions that we have issued so far are already biting hard. But today we are stepping up the pressure on Russia with a 9th package of sanctions. First, we are proposing to add almost 200 additional individuals and entities.
So I went through all of those things. So that's the announcement. The Western media is hiding all of the protests. So
Yes.
you were in Germany this weekend. You noticed a number of protests.
Not at all hard to find. I thought that they would just be in major cities like Berlin, Munich. I was in a very small city in the south of Germany called Freiburg, and yeah, it was like right in the center of Christmas markets. And some of them looked a little antagonistic, but not really. It was like people, they looked really normal. People with really well-organized signs that just said, stop sanctions, it hurts people. It absolutely does when you think of the things that you are used to living with that you're not used to living without. I was reading a book over the weekend about Syria specifically, and how this sanctions that the United States put on Syria, some people call it sanctions of mass destruction, because when you think about how then you can't get antibiotics for your baby or things that you actually need to survive, like in Syria, those sanctions killed millions of people. We're about to see, because the winter solstice hasn't hit yet, how this winter will do without the trade of goods that we're used to, and whether or not these also will be sanctions of mass destruction.
So I'm sure if you tuned into the media the following day in those towns in Freiburg, like it probably wasn't even in the newspapers or not, the Western media has been ignoring these protests all over Europe. They've been I'm blocked on social media. We are not censoring here on this show. We don't do that. We show you the truth. So here is Stuttgart, Germany. Last night, thousands of people protesting Olaf Scholz and Ursula von der Leyen against these Russian sanctions. Take a look. They're saying that these... So what they're saying is we don't want to freeze. We don't want to starve for Zelensky. And of course, the German media isn't really covering this.
I was driving by one guy who had a big, sanction, like stop-in sanctions, and I rolled down the window and I went like, I was like,
Give him a big thumbs up.
Yes, I support the protest. I don't think sanctions are going to do anything at all. The friend that I was with, she was like, what are they chanting? Because they were saying something about supporting Nazis, about not doing that. And I was like, they literally already had a war about this. They feel like they do not need to have another one.
Right. So the Europeans have energy prices that have more than doubled. I mean, let us know in the chat where you are in the world. Are you in Europe? Are you in the United States? I mean, energy prices have in some places tripled. Let us know if you've experienced this in the chat right now, on Rumble, on Twitter, here on YouTube, wherever. The dinging is exactly the case. Just let us know what your thoughts are. Where have you seen energy prices? Europeans have seen energy prices more than double, even triple in some parts, thanks to your bonehead sanctions. They haven't worked. In fact, The Guardian today, look at this article. The ruble is soaring. Putin is stronger than ever. Our sanctions have backfired. Yeah. They backfired. So, this is from Simon Jenkins. They announced sanctions. They also announced another $2 billion to Ukraine. That's from Europe. We still have no idea where the money is going, by the way, inside Ukraine. Wouldn't you love to know where that money is going? Well, Congress of the United States isn't interested. No major news stations are covering the story. They're ignoring it.
Or they're taking another opportunity to hit at Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yes. This was her bill. And remember back, of course, at the beginning of this, in the spring, when Senator Rand Paul said, I'm not going to go along this next round of funding defense bill unless we have an audit put in place. And he was, of course, he wasn't allowed to get that motion on the table.
It died in the water.
It died. So now Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican, has come forward with her own bill on this. And it's not going to happen. It got voted down. So Democrats stepped in and said, no, we don't want to be auditing this. And the reason we don't want to audit, get this, is that, number one, it would send a signal, they say, to Ukraine that we're not interested in helping them anymore. And the second reason they said is that, well, no, an audit is just Russian propaganda. Oh, so it's Russian propaganda to find out where our money is going? Literally, a member of Congress, a sitting member of Congress, said that out loud. That this is Russian propaganda to want to audit the amount of billions that are going there. And of course, my immediate conspiracy theory brain goes to thinking about FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried and wanting to know where the money flowed. And they don't want it flowing. They don't want to show where it flowed.
Yes.
In fact, yesterday, Maxine Waters, who would be investigating the FTX thing, was like, nah, you don't need to testify. We don't need to have you come up. We don't need to subpoena you and come up and testify.
Well, she
Stay in the
clarified
Bahamas.
later on Twitter and said, it's on the table, is what she said.
Wouldn't he be the one? I mean, who else do you need? We're going to ask just other people, but Sam, you just enjoy the Bahamas.
You're having a hard month. We don't feel like we need to put this on you right now.
Could you imagine if it was Trump or any of the Trump clan? I mean, they would all be hauled in there. They'd be arrested, broken in at 6 in the morning at their house, and frog marched out.
Well,
No
exactly
Sam
where they don't want to look is where we should want to look.
Yes.
And, as someone who, look, it's the beginning of the month. I just balanced my checkbooks, in order to know what we have to spend for the rest of the month for Christmas. And
all right, that's enough of this. I got shit to do.